Well, hello. The reason that you are probably tuning in today is that you are about to do something big. Your project is going to change the way that your company does business. And if it's big and if it's worth doing, it's going to be disruptive, take a lot of time, and be expensive. All digital transformations are. But it's also going to be key to helping your company move into the future and staying competitive and operationally effective. Here's the bad news, is that 50% of the time, these digital transformations fail or fail to deliver the anticipated benefits. What we want to give you today are successful strategies to keeping your project on track and successful from the concept phase to go live and beyond.
Well, not only that, Bonnie, but we also want to be able to go through a number of different topics. You can read them right here. We're going to kind of go through the whole process of from the procurement of both the technology and the services. We're going to spend most of the discussion, obviously, on the services side. What is important to understand, though, is the way the industry's changed over the years is that a lot of technologies have gotten significantly easier to implement, either because they're already in the cloud, they can be instantiated in mere minutes as opposed to months on site. You don't have to buy hardware and configure it and do all the integrations. A lot of that comes pre-supplied. But that said, that doesn't mean that because things got simpler, it doesn't mean that projects are any more successful or not. In fact, a lot of the old issues are still there. You have problems with people who don't want to change, who want to live in the past, who want to always remind you. But Brian, that's not the way great grandpa set up the company in '07. All those kind of issues are still there. You've got projects where they want to staff nothing but part-timers on them and can't believe that the thing doesn't really move with the speed of light. And of course, there's that age-old problem in a lot of projects, politics. And we'll touch on a lot of these kind of points, but we're going to start with the beginning when people acquire new technology, and importantly, the kind of partner that's going to help them make it become a reality. We'll have some discussion on the dream team that you'll want to assemble. We also want to look at two other areas, the course that you're going to chart, and we're going to have some fascinating conversation on that. We're going to look at close with some risk factor analysis. When you're watching all this, I'd like you to think about three different things. Bonnie, who you saw on the just a moment ago, is going to be covering this kind of world based on the vast number of reviews that her firm does in looking at implementers all over the world. Mike, who you'll meet in a moment, he's got a viewpoint that because around the different kinds of plans people put together. Are they really workable and viable, and do they have a great process for getting this thing done? And you'll understand more of that in a moment. And I'm going to take this from the very practical doer side, simply based on my background, having done a ton of giganto projects all over the world. And so that's the topics for today. Let's get a quick little intro from everybody on who everyone is. And I am Brian Sommer, by the way, and I have my own firm, TechNvent. I've been doing this for a long, long, long time. But more than that, I used to be a partner with Accenture. I was with them for 18 years. And not only did I implement giant like shared service projects all over the world, but I also was a quality assurance partner on an untold number of projects, making sure they were on track and going to cross the finish line successfully. Mike, tell the world about you.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Bonnie. My name is Mike Sanka. I'm the founder and CEO of Movewa, and we are a work and AI-assisted work management and project platform. In a past lifetime, my last business was a business intelligence and analytics platform that served around compliance. That was acquired by Equifax back in 2011. And working in that credit agency world and the scoring and the risk management world, took a lot of those ideas and technologies and started this work management platform to take those ideas about data-driven science around work management. And just excited to talk about that today, and excited to participate in this webinar today with both of you.
Well, hi, I'm Bonnie Tinder. I'm the founder and CEO of Raven Intel. Raven Intel is a peer review site. We help customers make a great decision in a consulting partner and really seek to improve the project experience. We have over 900 customer reviews about enterprise software projects and the consulting partners that lead them. And our star rating system gives you a glance at which are the best SIs and which you need to look out for. You can read all of our reviews at ravenintel.com.
All right, and let's get right into it. I think where a lot of projects go wrong almost from the very beginning is they choose maybe not the best solution that they should have for the firm. I'll never forget one time I was helping a Dow Jones Industrial 30 company pick a new accounting system. And the CEO of the company walked over to me one day and he had an ad that he'd torn out of a airline magazine for a little PC-based small business accounting solution that cost about $30 per user per month. And he goes, Brian, why can't we use that for our firm? And I mean, we're talking a company with 108 legal entities operating in 70 something countries around the world. And, I knew I quickly disabused him of that idea because it just wasn't going to fly. It wasn't going to scale with the kind of company he had. I tell you that story because sometimes people choose a lot of technology without doing a whole lot of work. They rely on a recommendation of someone who might have been their old integrator or vendor that they've used for the last 20 years. And I'm going to give you some relationship advice right now. Just because someone, worked with you in a good way 20 years ago doesn't necessarily mean they're the best choice to work with you going forward for the next 20 years. The advice columnist, I think it was Dear Abby, used to famously opine that you may want to seek true love elsewhere. And I would advise you to cast a wide net when you're making one of these big changes. Look at this, make sure you're making the right choice. Make sure you're solving the real business problems. Too often, too many companies, I think, rush into something. They go with a recommendation from a brother-in-law or whatever. And they're doing something because they've heard of the vendor, but not necessarily because it's the best fit. Make sure you get out there, play in traffic, and do some real shopping around. And here's the bottom line on this, folks. A lot of companies are stuck with a piece of technology for 10 to 20 years. And to really put that in a sharp perspective, a lot of marriages don't even last 7. So why are you going to spend less effort into evaluating a technology your company may be saddled with for a decade or two that you would put more effort into picking a mate for life, if you will, or 7 years, whatever it's going to be. But bottom line here, guys, watch out. Make sure you choose the best implementation partner. And for that, after you've chosen the best technology and you want to get the new implementation partner, I'm going to turn it over to Bonnie to give you some counsel on that.
And really, your project success is going to depend on 2 good decisions. Like Brian said, you have to choose the right software. But the second big decision that you need to make is to choose the right consulting firm to lead you down that implementation. If your implementation fails, it doesn't matter how good that software is. And so choosing the best implementation partner, the best implementation path is a huge key in your success. We talk a lot in the selection process about fit. And, there's a lot of variety in the consulting world and specialties and things like that. There's not a one-size-fits-all consulting firm that is right for your project. The way that this works is that your software salesperson is probably going to walk in a couple partner choices, to you and recommend them. I would not stop there. I strongly urge you to create an independent process where you are looking across multiple firms, multiple specialties, and really getting the most competitive look at what your options are. And certainly Raven Intel is a great way to do that. Why it doesn't work for your SI or your consulting firm to recommend the SI is that, number one, they are not necessarily going to give you that best fit approach. The people that they recommend or the firms that they recommend are the ones that, sponsored the last rock band at their customer conference back, when we had customer conferences, or they're the ones that are bringing them the most business. That's not necessarily the right fit for you and your project. And so that's why, it's really important to take a wider look than what you're hearing directly from the software firm.
I was going to add in there, I've, in very practical reasons, I've actually called Bonnie's firm up a couple of occasions in the last couple of years. One of them, I was running a project in Panama. Bonnie's probably flashing on, wonder when that one was, but anyway. That was fascinating because the vendors all coughed up names of potential integrators that could implement their respective solutions. But it turned out that after talking with Bonnie's folks, we found out that most of them were pretty mediocre outfits and from customer reviews. And the ones that were highly rated, which the vendors never mentioned, ended up being outstanding companies. So do your homework, folks. And I'm not plugging Bonnie's deal, but I am just telling you that I use it practically with clients in doing these selections, because I want to remind people what you want is you want a professional that is going to be a zealous advocate for your firm, not someone who has like a monetary relationship with either a vendor, a partner, or some kind of joint marketing slush fund they're working with. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be valuable for you.
Right. And I think the other misnomers out there is that, if you hire a firm that has a Big Five brand name, or you've used them in the past for a different project within your company, you still want to look and evaluate, are they the right fit for my project? We see absolutely no correlation between a Big Five brand name SI and an independent. In fact, we actually see some of the independents doing some really quality work for a great value. So again, it's not to say that an independent is right, but certainly taking a broader look is going to ensure that you're going to get competitive deal and the best option for your company. Next slide, please. Thank you. So if the project is big enough, as they are, you're going to want to define a solid RFP and RFI. If the project is smaller, I'd still urge you to look across SIs and make sure that you're doing a selection process there. And even if it's a small one, put something in writing that has some general parameters to work with. I would recommend not boiling the ocean and sending your RFP to 50 firms. Really get to a short list early and then go deep with those folks. And I mean, go deep with them. Make sure that you're spending the time evaluating who your SI is and giving them the proper time to do a due diligence of your project. Conversely, if you have an SI that's wanting you to rush through the process and just gives you a lowball bid quickly, you want to weed those guys out early. You are going to see the best of a partner during the sales process. They are going to pull out all the stops, all their best people, all of those things, which is great. I mean, obviously you want them to do that. But if they are not spending the time to do a proper discovery during this phase, it's not going to get better during the project. So make sure that you give them the time to do the discovery and make sure that they're asking the right questions or ensuring that they are, understanding your needs as well.
So let me amplify Bonnie's last point there. I help clients with all kinds of, implementations and negotiations and selections. And when there is a vendor, an implementer that will not even bother to show up even once to do a proposal, you need to kick them to the curb. That's in my humble opinion. I don't do that with my own clients. I spend the time working with them to make sure I really understand the problems that are going to be solved so that we come up with a proposal that will not have surprises. I'm proud to say that in the last 10 years, I haven't had a single reason to issue only one um, change order, and that was because the client had divested about 40% of their business in the middle of a project. So we had to do some adjustments there. But that's just one. If you let them give you a generic proposal and you're agreeing to let them spend the first 30 days or 6 weeks of the project to really find out what's going on while they're running up the meter, they're going to bury you in a bunch of change orders, and none of that was competitively bid, and all that's a surprise, and it's going to make you look like an idiot to the executive committee or the board of directors, because now you got to go in and explain, why did the project cost double and you're only 3 weeks into the project? So, there are issues with, I don't care how much you like and trust the people or you have good chemistry, but if they won't even bother to show up and really verify the scope and get this right and tight, you can't do business with these people, because they're trying to suck you in on a lowball deal and then screw you in a non-competitive fashion later on. Sorry for the rough language there, but that's the reality of what goes on. And there are millions of dollars at stake on these deals.
Yeah.
Well,
And
I think, I was going to say the point that you're underscoring is you've got to do the homework up front. As much as it would be nice to sort of just go, hey, my job is to get access for the budget or do the business case. Failure to do that homework up front in that process is just going to result in problems later.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what I would say is I get a lot of customers who said, oh, well, we thought they gave us a good feeling, or we thought they were culturally aligned, during the selection process. And that's great. And you don't want to minimize those sort of interpersonal sort of, feelings that you have. On the other hand, in order to make sure that your project, is going to, go well in the long term, you need to sort of codify, some standard parameters about that project that go beyond, hey, we thought it was a cultural fit, because in many cases your team is going to change, the team members of the SI could potentially change. And so you want to make sure that you have a good contractual process that ensures that cultural fit is a piece of some of the overall pie. The last point I want to make is you want to trust but verify. Your SI or the SIs that you bring in will be very eloquent in speaking about their experience. That's what they do. They speak a lot. Consultants offer lots of guidance and things like that. So it's not to minimize that, and they're well versed in that area. But you want to make sure that you are backing up their claims, and that they have evidence that they've really done projects like the one you're about to do. So check and see, what are previous customers saying? Ask them, have you done a project like mine before in my industry? What is your overall on time, on budget delivery rate? How many change orders do you regularly have in a project? Because it's those sort of past history indicators which will tell you, all of the good feelings in the world won't matter if they don't have a good track record of success. And certainly that's why I founded the company, that I run, Raven Intel, and that those are the things that we are looking at about SIs to help a customer really understand independently, does this check out? So trust but verify.
So let's jump into the dream team here. These are the folks you want on your implementation project. And this includes both your team, your people, as well as any from outside firms or other outside like contractors. And I'm going to actually drain a number of these because they're all relatively important. You want someone who's going to be the overall manager who's actually done several of this kind of project. This is not a place where you want a rookie. This is someone who kind of already knows through rote memory. They already know all the steps, the sequence of how things happen. And they'll know in a split second where the wheels are coming off the wagon, if you will, on the project. You also want systems integrator kind of resources who are quite solid, and you've met them during the contracting phase. You know them, you've interviewed them. You're pretty darn confident that they actually know and possess deep, detailed knowledge of the products and that their certifications are actually real. Be real careful about certifications because some people buy answers or just get the answers to certification questions online. You need to quiz people to make sure they actually do know the subject. The overall project leader and sponsor, what have you, needs to be somebody who has enough political capital to see this effort through the end. Believe it or not, this is a question I ask potential clients right off the bat, because there's no point in me trying to expend effort to put together a proposal and everything else and find out that there are other political sharks in that company who are already trying to kill off a project, and I know this thing is never going to make it. So you need to find somebody who's really got the ability to make it happen and see it through to the end. You also want folks who are culturally aligned. It's a shame you can't really do this very easily over Zoom, but I love being at a client and looking at the project team people in the eye, and I can tell which ones are going to be real problems. I need the ones who are not going to fight change. I need the ones who are intellectually curious and are going to embrace change and are going to be enthusiastic about the effort and are going to help make this thing a success, because the manager alone or the leader alone cannot do it by themselves. And, that old adage about one bad apple spoils the barrel, you can definitely have that. So find that kind of alignment, make sure it's all there. You also don't want team members, and I mentioned this earlier, who are wedded to the past. I know that a lot of people are very comfortable with their old systems and practices and business processes, and they know those, and they feel like they're an old, comfortable, well broken in pair of slippers. And unfortunately, if you look at those slippers, you find out they're threadbare. There's a hole in the bottom of them. A change is needed. But these folks are definitely wedded to the past. And the key thing you need to do is put a sign up in your project team room with a big set of letters that says, nostalgia is not a strategy, because you're going to have to get them to move and to change. And I know Bonnie's itching to comment here. I'll just put on this. I'll do one more point here about the experienced technical person. You want someone who knows where every landmine in the product or the integration or whatever is going to be. And what they do is, that kind of person is invaluable in a project because they can stop the project team in a split second from going down an unproductive path and wasting a lot of time and money. They'll tell you, like, I don't care what the product manual says, the product actually can't do something and we need to go this other direction. That kind of counsel is absolutely invaluable and makes the difference between a project finishing on time versus a project finishing ahead of schedule. So Bonnie, take it.
For sure. And if you select the A team to do the project, I mean, they're probably the least likely to have the bandwidth to do the project. And so I think it's really important when you're assembling your internal team is that you get, top talented group, but then you also make sure that they have the bandwidth to dedicate the time and attention to the project that will give it its due. And to the extent that you can minimize their day-to-day, actual job and allow them the ability to really focus on, the project's success throughout the entire duration of the project, that's really going to bode well. Where problems creep up is where you have internal change on the team, or you have certainly internal, change on the external change on the SI team as well. So that's a different story. But internally, that churn is not going to bode well for your project. So you want to find a solid team that has their ability to dedicate the time and attention to the project and is committed to the project throughout the duration of it. Again, both from your internal team and then certainly from the SI team, you want to make sure contractually that the resources that you have assigned are the ones that are going to stay throughout the project, because knowledge transfer mid-project is always disruptive, and that's where things really fall off. So those are my comments, yeah.
So before we hand it to Mike, let me just say, There's two things here. We've been talking on this slide about how assembling a great team of people. You can have a great team, but if you have a terrible plan, the whole thing's going to blow up. And vice versa. You could have a terrible team and a great plan, and you won't get across the finish line either. So we just, Bonnie and I talked about the team. Now let's hear from Mike to talk about the plan.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you, Brian and Bonnie. So one of the things as you go into this project, as Bonnie said, it's not a trivial project and it's not a trivial amount of money. And so defining this definition, the blueprint of what you're actually going to get done is really critically important. It serves a lot of purposes, right? At the end of the day, this is the medium with which you're going to communicate to your senior leadership, your executives. It's how you and your SI will work together. It is the roadmap that you're going to move forward on. Unfortunately, the realistic truth that what you're going to have to deal with is that 96% of managers don't have the skills to manage a project plan. And that's a really big problem for organizations, especially for the customers. Yes, your SIs are going to have people who are trained around project management. But unfortunately, one of the things we even see in that arena is there's a lot of preventable risk that occurs around this. Now, how that manifests in your organization, because you're going to have a lot of teams, there are going to be a lot of parts of your organization working on this. It manifests in a lot of different ways. One of those is, what does red, yellow, and green mean? You're going to become very familiar with those colors as your project goes on. Oh, red is bad, yellow is warning, green is good, right? But unfortunately, those are all really subjective definitions. And if those subjective definitions are given by people who don't have training and experience around that internally, you're going to have surprises, which sort of brings me to the next metaphor, which is the watermelon project. You don't want a watermelon project. The watermelon project is green on the outside and red on the inside. And that means that things seem like they're going along really, really well until they're not. And everyone knows what that surprise is like. And I'm sure Brian can tell you about many projects that he's monitored or observed where there was a preventable risk that was identified late, and he probably looked at it and went, you know, that was preventable had you identified that earlier in the process, because now you're fighting against time.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. But I got to first say that when you made that mention about the project looked good and then all of a sudden fails, it reminds me of a line in Ernest Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises, where he talks about two guys are talking and one says, how did your business fail? And the other character says, slowly at first and then all of a sudden. And I would argue that projects fail the same way. So the example I would give is there was a project that went into litigation. I didn't have anything to do with that other than just expert oversight on, on the trial. And what was fascinating to me was you could look at the work plan and you could see that they had some people staffed like 220 hours of work a week. You know, it was an unrealistic amount of work, but because no one bothered to make sure that the plan footed tied and had reasonable workloads for people, it was doomed from the get-go. But at no point in this case, this trial, did the project implementer, they never brought that up with the client until it was too darn late and the project was millions over budget and the plan was just not workable. So if the plan's not right, it's like we said before, it's just not going to work.
Thank you, Brian. So, and this is probably also something that I'm sure if we had more time, Brian could probably cover a lot, is there will be problems. So you have to understand, and not to geek out too much in the world of math and analytics, but statistically, these large enterprise projects, the math is horribly bad, not in your favor. And so you kind of have to do battle against that dragon. And we know that there will be change. There will be problems. The question is, what do you do to manage those problems? And unfortunately, having a bad plan and having a poorly structured plan and a poorly monitored plan can be a very, very big difference. You know, we all go get dental x-rays or go to the dentist on a regular basis because if we have a problem, we'd really much rather that be a filling getting filled as opposed to root canal. And, you know, obviously everyone thinks money is very important in these projects, and that's going to be a big part of your selection process and the quality of the team. But I would argue the single most important resource you are going to continue to have in this project is time and how and what you can do with that time. So as you look at this and you think about time in these large scale projects, how are you going to manage the large scale project? And so I'll talk a little about sort of the advances in what you can do to monitor. Now, the reality is up to kind of this point, people have managed or run the information in projects with 100-year-old technology, which is a Gantt chart. Everyone knows what a Gantt chart looks like. They're used everywhere. They have their list, but that was invented 100 years ago, right? The technology you're buying is not 100 years old. The collaboration, the people, the third parties, the multinational, how you digitally transform your organization isn't 100 years old, and how you collaborate and work isn't, but you're using 100-year-old tools. That's dangerous, right? That's dangerous when you look at these projects. And so what I want to talk to you a little about is using AI-assisted technologies to kind of find those risks, remediate those, and make sure you can focus on the qualitative aspects of your project, right? So there are really three areas that we like to think about when we think about autonomous technologies for effective execution. And the first is risk scoring. Having this high-level KPI, a simple number that you can elevate, whether it's to the program or project manager or executive sponsorship, to say, hey, this is the health of the project and the plan and the way it's looking. Are we on time or not? Because no executive sponsor is going to want to look at a 1,000-task project plan or get into the details. They want to know, hey, are we on time, and can I believe your date? Can I believe your date? Because that comes to the watermelon project is, hey, we're going to go live on April 17th. And then on April 2nd, you hear, hey, we're going to be 4 months late. Really? That wasn't knowable like 6 months ago? It was knowable 6 months ago. Unfortunately, there were flaws in the plan. So having a score and understanding, is this a believable date? Can I believe what we're saying and moving forward? There's a mathematical way to do that. And that comes to the next part, which is diagnostics, right? Taking this idea of debugging code, all the software you're going to buy, those programmers are really, really smart, but that code has to be debugged because they make mistakes. The software changes. There's a lot of complexity. You need to be doing the same thing in your plan because it's going to live. Remember, we talked about that one constant being change. Those changes are going to cause problems. And continuously looking at that, diagnosing and debugging that plan is going to give you more accurate insight around problems to solve them faster. And the last part, this AI-led remediation comes back to saying, look, remember you have 96% of your people who don't know how to manage a project? They're not going to go get certified on project management, and that communication isn't going to occur. So having an AI-led remediation process and education is going to elevate their performance. It's what technology is and digital transformation is really supposed to do, is sort of give you a brand new skill set you didn't have yesterday so you can execute and move faster and better. So we really try to provide a lot of encouragement around saying, hey, don't just use 100-year-old technology with brand new software you're going to buy because you're really taking on a lot of unnecessary risk. Thank you. Bonnie, Brian, I'll turn it over to you to talk about some of the risk factors, and I've got a few thoughts here as well. Bonnie, you're on mute.
Thank you. So in terms of your overall plan, you probably will go with a standard methodology that might be set by your software vendor and your SI, or that framework that you've created. But the rest laid plans can have these risk factors that pop up or unknowns. So let's talk through a couple of those. Brian, did you want to talk through some of your favorites?
Let's take the very first one. What I've learned over the years doing global or multinational projects is there's a multitude of country-specific either specifications, applications, regulations, tax filings, and all that. And those are more practical kind of things that you can deal with. But there's also languages and a lot of soft side stuff. I remember I was the QA partner on a project in Lyon, France, and right after lunch, one of the project managers came over to talk to me and said that the team was upset with me. And I'm like, how? I haven't even met with most of them. And they go, yeah, well, you see, they're used to interacting with their leadership during a cappuccino or going outside for a smoke. And since you don't smoke or drink coffee, they haven't had that opportunity to meet with you. So I hit a cultural wall right off the bat on that one, but I quickly got around that. I introduced them to Dr. Pepper, and everything was good. I'm kidding. I don't think they'd ever drink a Dr. Pepper in Leon. But that's one of them. I thought that was that's something that really gets to be an issue. And the other thing, like the standard plan kind of falls apart when you start thinking about some of my clients might have anywhere from 30 to 150, 200 legal entities. And, now you're dealing with a scale, and some of that scale almost becomes multiplicative because maybe you can't do something with one legal entity until you've already converted or dealt with another one. And so you get all these interrelationships, interdependencies start popping up. But a great planner has to be able to put all that kind of stuff together and figure out the right route to get some of that happen. Mike, why don't you weigh in with one or two, and then we'll throw the ball back to Bonnie.
Yeah, one of the things that we've heard over the years and we sort of understand really has a huge effect on execution and timelines is accountability, especially internal team accountability. So a lot of organizations make the mistake of thinking that because they email an internal team or email an internal stakeholder, that they've got commitment from that team to deliver on the timelines and the dates. And frequently they don't, or they haven't communicated to their team members. And so when things are delayed, aren't delivered, there's a capacity problem, they go, well, I told you. Yeah, well, you sent it to me via email along with the other 400 I got that day. So understanding that you have confirmation of life around those really important commitments internally in your organization are going to be essential to hitting those deadlines. Because here's what's going to happen. The SI isn't going to want to tell you it's your fault. It might be your fault because your team didn't have the time to do it, but they're in a difficult situation because they're a vendor and they're certainly not going to want to point a finger at you. And all of a sudden you're going to be left wondering, hey, why did this delay occur? Why didn't you tell me sooner? So getting that confirmation is critical, especially on key internal resources to make sure they can deliver on time. Otherwise, as Brian said, you're going to get that change order, or you're going to have those consultants and you're going to have them around longer, which just means more cost and delay for you.
I think one of the huge risk factors that so many clients this year experienced was the pandemic and all of the shutdowns that caused no longer able, people no longer to be able to meet in person, and so many downstream effects for projects in play. We looked at the impact that COVID had on projects, and 37% of them that were in flight actually paused or stopped. So who could have guessed that we would have had this situation in February? So I think what we want to really convey on this slide is that during a project you need to be resilient and sort of go in with a little bit of padding on the front end to account for some of these things that may come up in the project itself. We'll cover just a couple more of them. So internal changes that you have, I mentioned that a little bit earlier on the team slide, but I can't minimize, I can't stress enough how important it is to keep your team consistent internally and at your SI. Because knowledge transfer, that really takes and derails or changes the dynamic of a project. And then, too many cooks in the kitchen. The further that you get in a project, what's typical is that you start adding more people to the mix. And all of those new people, will slow things down. They'll have different ideas and they'll change the scope. If you can actually be very cognizant as you go through your project timeline and know that toward the end, you actually want to bring less people into the fold, because by the time you're at the end of a project, making changes is a lot more expensive than had you done that in the beginning. So you want to keep that team consistent, and you don't want to add superfluous team members that can potentially slow you down or take your project in a different direction.
One other thing too, Bonnie, that you sort of touched on a little bit indirectly is what I'll call noise management. So this is a very big project. A lot of people are going to be involved. And in the end of the day, you're going to have problems. Your ability to curate the number one problem or the number one challenge you're facing is going to be critical. So you can escalate that not only to the executive sponsor in the organization, but also to the head of the SI that's going to be working, or the software vendor. And you got to remember that the executive sponsor isn't going to want to go through lots and lots of detail. They can throw dollars, they can put phone calls out, they can manage through resource and effort, right? But they've got to know what that problem is and how to intersect that problem. So it is important that when you're tracking and managing, to curate and identify what's the problem that this individual can help us with to move the ball forward.
Without a doubt. So in closing, we're really here to help ensure your project success. So in the early stages, as you're selecting your software vendor, talk to Brian. He will help you sort of cut through the noise in the marketplace and really help you find that good software fit and negotiate the best deal, for your company. Raven Intel and I am here to help you find the perfect partner for your project as well, based upon customer and very objective peer reviews. And then finally, Mike and the Movilla project management software is really designed to help keep your project on track and use the latest and greatest technologies with AI to identify your risks. And Mike, you have a special offer as well for companies that might be going through a project soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. We're excited to offer a copy. Brian actually has 2 books out right now. We're excited to provide a copy of that book for those people who are interested in getting their project plan score. We'll score that at no cost. We'll use our AI-led technologies to identify the risks that exist in your plan and tell you whether or not the date structure and the forecasts are predictable and accurate, that there's integrity. I think you'd be amazed at how many, if that's the blueprint for your home, you'd be amazed at how many blueprints out there have no stairs going from the first floor to the second floor. So we're willing to take that plan, score it, and identify that risk for you at no cost. And you'll get a copy of a great book to help facilitate you along the way. And I guess we've got it there at movilla.com/Project Anatomy.
Fantastic. Any closing thoughts, Brian or Mike?
Well, I'll go, and then Brian, you can maybe wrap up because you've got probably the most wisdom on this phone call and experience in the process. My 2 cents is there's preventable risk out there. Identify it early, and then you can focus on the really important things. Don't get sidetracked or waylaid by a preventable risk. Focus on the really important things, and your life and the project will go a lot smoother.
I'll close with this thought. It's an old Texas adage, wanting and getting are 2 different things. And you might want a successful project really, really, really bad. Whether you get it or not depends on a whole lot of other factors and how much work you're going to do to make it a reality. So pick well, pick wisely, and do your homework, and you'll be happy you did. But also don't be afraid to lean on some great folks to get you, get you closer to that goal line all the way around. That's it for me.
Great, thank you. And thanks to you for joining. We'll look forward to following up with you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.